So it's actually been a couple of days since I filmed those initial clips of starting A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. So far, I'm really enjoying this. This is like one of those books where it just finds you at exactly the right moment, because a lot of the things that the characters are dealing with in this book are really resonating with a lot of my current experiences, and also just experiences that I've had throughout most of my life. Following a character named Sarah, and Sarah was like a witch and she had immense magical power. However, her aunt Jasmine, who raised her after her parents abandoned her, dies. Sarah brings her aunt back to life, and by forming this resurrection spell actually ends up losing almost all of her magical power. This is really devastating for Sarah, because losing her magic was like losing a core part of who she was and how she conceptualized her belonging within the world and her community at large. And similarly, our other main character, Luke, he is a librarian at the Witches' Council that Sarah used to be a part of, and he is going through some similar struggle, not necessarily with himself, but with his family at large. He has a younger sister named Posey who actually has autism. She really struggles to be able to fit in. She also has higher support needs, which are not being met, and Luke is really struggling to try and get people to care about Posey, to try and help her. That resonates a lot with my experience as someone who is autistic and is also trying to directly navigate those things in my own life. And as I've been sort of reading through this, I also think that Luke himself might be autistic. There are just certain like clues that I'm getting from the narration about Luke's own internal experiences that I find relate to mine a lot. And I am also someone who has family members who do have other disabilities, and for most of my life I felt like I didn't have a right to struggle with a lot of the things that I struggled with related to disability, because I knew that other people struggled more and I saw that in my daily life. I really resonate a lot with Luke's experience and also with Sarah's as well, because part of like my journey with autism has been, for most of my life, I was told that I was really smart or really brilliant, but I actually recently found out that I have learning disabilities that I never knew about, and I've been kind of going through the struggles of having those learning disabilities and sort of suppressing it my entire life. And I feel like that really resonates with both of the characters' experiences, because both of them in different ways have lost, whether intentionally or not, a part of themselves by pretending to be someone else or being forced to be something else than who they actually are. So I have a couple of tabs in the book that were like scenes that I wanted to read off. And so the first one is about partway through the book, and it's a scene where Luke has taken his sister Posey out to do something, and he's expressing a lot of sensory discomfort about the world around him. And this was sort of the first scene that I was like, I think Luke might be autistic himself, because just the way that the author is using language to describe what he's feeling internally has just really resonated with me. He steeled himself. The flashing lights and obnoxious loud music in arcades were his idea of sensory hell, and that was before he got into the finer nightmarish details of the relentless clatter of coins dropping into machines filled with hideous toys and keychains that hardly anyone ever actually won. But Posey, for some reason he'd never been able to understand, loved it. The lights, the sounds, the act of dropping coins into the machine to make things happen, all of it. For all the ways Luke and Posey were alike, from their ability to hyper-focus on something they love for hours, to their loathing of crowded places, to their uncompromising refusal to wear anything made of scratchy wool, arcades were one of just as many things that they absolutely did not see eye to eye on. Just the way that the author is using language to describe Luke's discomfort, but also how appreciative he is of his sister's enjoyment of this thing that he doesn't like, and the way that he's just willing to go through this because it makes her happy as well, is so like warming. Something that I've kind of struggled a lot with navigating disability is this notion that a lot of people have a set particular idea of what like a disability can look like. This scene in particular is really challenging that narrative by showing that how Luke and Posey, who one of them is autistic and one of them I think could be autistic, both have different sensory needs. And so So I really liked that scene, and it really resonated a lot with me. There's also another scene as well where Luke is really struggling to try and help Posey to find a place where she belongs. She's not being accepted at her school or at the guild hall because in this world it's like witches have to hide their magic, but Posey, because she's autistic, isn't really able to understand those sort of strict rules. But there's a lot of other characters who are willing to help, and I really like just the kindness there because it's so different from what my experience has been. And so seeing this young girl who's autistic be able to get that help and be able to find like a community and a place where she belongs is so lovely. And also how Luke is going through the same process as well, but he's internalized that he doesn't deserve to have that same inclusion. And that's also something that Sarah's going through as well, because she feels like she's unworthy of acceptance in her community because she no longer is able to live up to the standard of what she used to be. And it's really emotional to see both of those characters going through that, but I just love how the book has gone about talking about those issues and having those experiences be a common place where the characters are able to find common ground. And yet for some reason it felt like that was exactly where they were supposed to be. Like this was the thing that had somehow become important. Like his lonely and her lonely fit perfectly into the empty spaces at the other side, saying nothing, asking nothing, just keeping each other company. The incomprehensible, it turned out, was becoming comprehensible. Whether it was Sarah, who'd forgotten how to fly and longed for the sky, or Jasmine, who hadn't been loved and now loved everyone twice as hard, or Nicholas, who had walked away from a life of luxury in Mayfair because he couldn't bear to be a part of a family that had built its wealth on the blood and bones of others. These people were becoming clearer and realer, all of them. Their fairy tale peculiarity side by side with the quiet, ordinary things they dreamed of. Their unwavering hope for the future hand in hand with the desolation of their past. That Luke could understand. History was how he made sense of the world, after all. And what was history if not collections of stories to make the incomprehensible comprehensible? The downside of this understanding, of course, was the discovery that he was the odd one out. This was a place stitched together by resistance, by acts of defiance, by people who could not or would not go gently down the path the world had decided was inevitable. But Luke had never resisted. He had never defied. If resistance had an opposite, surely the opposite was resignation. And if there was one thing Luke had always done very well, it was resigning himself to the inevitable. He didn't belong here any more than he'd belonged anywhere else, but for the first time in 34 years, oh, he wished he did. It's like underpinning sadness behind exploring both Sarah and Luke's own internal struggle. A lot of Sarah's struggles as well are connected to the theme of like colonial domination as well, because Sarah comes from an immigrant family. Her mother, I believe, is Icelandic and her father is Indian. And this was also a big theme in Sangu Mandanna's other book, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. A big theme in both of these books is how the Witches' Council is a metaphor for the British colonial government, and a lot of these sort of restrictions on witches in particular is supposed to relate to different colonial policies that Britain had about regulating who got to be British and which ways people could represent their identities. There is a scene in this book that I really enjoyed, and it's talking about Sarah and also her connection that she has with one of her neighbors named Malik, who is also a immigrant. And it says they didn't talk about the immigrants out poster they'd once seen at the Red Lion, favorite local pub, until that exact moment, but it wasn't a coincidence they started going to the Red Rose after that. They didn't talk about the way it messed up with their heads to belong to this country, at least on paper, and still know from experiences that the white flag with a saint's red cross on it was something to be afraid of. Theirs was a friendship built on unspoken, shared understanding that you can love the home you've made with the whole of your heart and still know the land it's built on will never claim you. Theirs was a friendship that did not talk about the things that cut deepest, but it understood that those things were there and respected them and gave them space. I really liked that. Also how the book is exploring how we can find connection in all these different ways, and that connection is based on shared trauma essentially. It doesn't necessarily mean that we always have to give voice to it, and I think that's really what made this scene in this book really impactful. I feel like so much of when we talk about marginalization or discrimination, there is sort of this onus on the person who is victimized by that discrimination to talk about that experience. But I really liked this presentation where that experience can exist without having to talk about it directly, and also the importance of finding people in your community who understand the particularities of your own experiences. I just love how the book at large has been building up these different notions of acceptance and community, finding your place in the world, and how that one line about how it's always going to be fraught, that you can have a home in a place that's not going to accept you, but you have to carve it out for yourself, I think is a really important way of looking at it. Really enjoying this book so far, and the themes and topics that it's talking about are ones that are really resonating with me at this present moment. And I wanted to talk about it because I felt like a big part of why I wanted to start this channel in general was to connect with people about shared experiences, because reading for me has always been a way that I've been able to connect with myself. I view books as almost like having a conversation where you and the author, the characters, the story are all almost sitting down at a table together, and you bring all your own story with you as well as the characters do, and so does the author. I really like being able to talk about books because it is a way of sort of making that conversation known to more people, and also including more people within that as well. I hope maybe if you are feeling similar to me about things, like whether or not you resonate with my experiences with disability, or if you have other experiences of discrimination or whatnot, I would encourage you maybe to pick up this book, because I do think that it is challenging a lot of those implicit notions of what is normal and who gets to be normal and who gets to be included, and is all about sort of resisting against the categories that people like to put us in, and the way that society likes to keep us separate and likes to tell us that we're not worthy of our own existences if we are too different from what is accepted. I hope maybe to like finish it tonight, maybe, possibly, I don't know. I have a couple of other things that I need to do. Tomorrow is actually Thanksgiving here in Canada, so we have to make some like pies and stuff like that, so maybe I'll try and take some footage. And there is also the next phase of the Marvel Rifles Ignite tournament, which is happening soon, which I don't know if anyone watching this is interested in Marvel Rivals, but honestly it's just been something that I've found really like entertaining to watch. I just like it. I like the game, even though I'm not very good at playing it, so watching other people who are good at it play is sometimes more entertaining. So that is my plans for the rest of the night. And then I probably do have to at some point do some work, project due in one of my classes, and I had to read a book for that, so possibly I might film another update talking about that book when I get around to actually working on the review that I have to do for it. I don't know if that's interesting for people, but I'm sort of treating this as like documenting my thoughts on things, and so I'm hoping that in doing that I might be able to through the thoughts that I have about that book. Definitely update once I finish this book, and then maybe talk about academic book that I had to read. it's been about 2 days and I have actually finished A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping and just wanted to film a brief update about my thoughts on sort of the end of the book. Overall, I really ended up enjoying this one. I do think that there was some issues with like the pacing and also how well some of the characters' personal stories were integrated with the overall plot of the book, but still overall my feelings are very positive about it. I ended up giving it 5 stars because of how much I resonated with the characters throughout the story. I also would have liked to see a little bit more romance scenes between Luke and Sarah before the book had ended, and also get a bit more clarity on how the other characters have ended up, because some of them do go through some pretty significant changes in their life. It could potentially be that Sangu Mandanna wants to write another book set in this world, as this one is also sort of a spin-off from the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. So it could potentially be that she wants to leave some of these plot lines open to continue them further, but I think it didn't really take away from my enjoyment overall of the novel, but I still am kind of sad that we're not going to be following more of Sarah and Luke and the shenanigans going on at the end, just because I really connected with them and I loved the sort of found family aspect and would have liked just a little bit more of those characters and also some firmer conclusions. If there ends up being a second book for the same cast of characters, I would be really excited about that as well. So overall, really enjoyed this one and would highly recommend it for anyone who's interested. It has a lot of themes about found family and connection and finding yourself and sort of searching for a sense of identity in the world, and I think that resonates with a lot of experiences that others have gone through as well. I also have started another book. I had actually started this one a couple of weeks ago and I started reading it on audiobook, and it's called Shield of Sparrows, and this one is by Devney. This is her fantasy romantasy debut. Basically, she is a romance author, and so far I think I am enjoying this one. I'm about 30% of the way through, maybe a little bit more. We're following a main character named Odessa, who is princess of this kingdom, and every so often the princesses of this kingdom are sent as brides to the kings or princes of another kingdom as part of this treaty or bargain that was signed centuries ago. There hasn't been a lot of world building so far, and it does sort of make sense why there hasn't been, because our main character was not the princess groomed to be this sparrow. That instead was her younger sister May. But on the night of the wedding, when the foreign prince arrives, he actually demands Odessa instead. The first sort of 20% of the book was following Odessa in her regular daily life, setting up why this event was so disruptive, and then there was the wedding. Afterwards, she's like traveling to the other kingdom, and I personally found that really boring. I don't really like traveling scenes in books, and this one they're like on a ship and whatnot, and so I found it a little bit boring. There's also this sort of mysterious figure called the Guardian, who I think in some way has like powers that help against these monsters that are kind of slowly becoming more relevant in the story as Odessa is encountering some of them for the first time, because her kingdom is for the most free from having to deal with these monsters because of the bargain that they made with this other kingdom, who instead has to deal with these monsters all the time. It is interesting to see some of that world building coming through as Odessa is traveling through the world. I'm kind of a bit confused about some of the romance things going on, because she's obviously married to the prince whose name is Xavier, but there's also that same guardian figure, and I feel like there's some sort of connection between the guardian and the prince that, like, I don't know, I'm kind of like speculating, and this like might be a spoiler, I don't know, but I think they might actually be like somehow the same person. I'm not 100% sure if that's at all accurate, but I'm just getting like these sort of red flags almost with both of the characters, and particularly about how they're both interacting with Odessa. Interested to see how the romance in this evolves, because she is married to one person, but she also has ongoing like flirty banter with the guardian figure as well. But I'm a bit hesitant as well, because I think the first like 20% of this book I was really enjoying, and then the 10% after that so far hasn't been enjoyable for me. Hoping that I will like this one as it continues. So it has been a couple of hours and I have made some pretty significant progress into Shield of Sparrows. I went out for a bit and the goal was to sort of go a bit up north to do some like nature walking and whatnot. However, it kind of ended up being a bit of a bust because some of the roads ended up being closed down because today in Canada is the like long weekend attached to Thanksgiving. The good news is though that I made a lot of progress in this book because I was reading it in the car. So I started the day off. I think I was on page 130 and I'm now about 460 pages in and I'm almost done this book. And I wanted to give an update about my feelings and some thoughts that I have about it before I finish it. Largely because when I finish books, I like automatically start thinking about the next book that I want to pick up. So I wanted to get some of my thoughts out about what I've been thinking without having to worry about like what I'm going to do next when this is done, because I've really been enjoying this story so far. I think I gave a bit of a brief summary about it and also expressed that I was feeling a bit dissatisfied with some things that were going on at about the 30% range, and since then I feel like the story has dramatically improved a lot. It was kind of a slow build, like I was still a little bit out of the story for like a couple chapters afterwards, but it really started to pick up. The action scenes in this are like honestly really well written. There's a lot of these like monster attacks happening at like, and they're just so well written, and the audiobook narration for it makes you feel like you're on the edge of your seat, like waiting to see what's gonna happen. You actually feel fear that Odessa is going through as you're reading through it. There's also been a lot of developments in the romance, and I did sort of mention something that I had like an idea about. A bit of a slight spoiler, I was like kind of right. It's still different than what I originally said, but there is something that does get revealed in this, and I like the way that it was revealed. I also like the romance between the characters. I'm not gonna say which of the two characters it is that she ends up with. I really have enjoyed their dynamic, and I think once you pick up this book and start reading through it, it does kind of become very obvious which one she likes more. I've really been enjoying their relationship and how they've like slowly gotten to know each other over the course of this book, and also how their relationship has been built upon actually knowing one another instead of like any sense of like an instant attraction, even though there is an aspect of like physical attraction. It's really refreshing to have a bit more of a slow burn. The characters have an actual like solid relationship before they started doing anything romantic, which I think is quite refreshing for a fantasy romance book. I also like how we've gotten to know a lot more about the characters' backstories and also more about the world as well. I said earlier that Odessa really doesn't know a lot of the world because she's been sheltered for most of her life, and so I really enjoyed reading through her, discovering new things about the world, and also how she has built connections with the people around her that has made them want to reveal these things. And so I really like how the development of her personal relationships has been tied to the actual development of the plot, as opposed to those things feeling separate, which sometimes I do feel happens in romantasy, where romance is happening completely unconnected to the plot. This one, the plot and the romance feel very interconnected. I've also just really been enjoying finding out more about this world. I still don't feel like the world building is like the best I've seen, but for a romantasy that is coming from an author who has previous experience in only writing contemporary romance, I think the world building is a lot better in my opinion than something like Fourth Wing. It's a lot more believable, and also how things are being revealed as well I think is more believable as well. And I think one of the problems that I've had with a series like Fourth Wing, for instance, is like how inconsistent it can be, whereas this one I feel like for the most part the world building has been pretty consistent. There's not a lot of secrets that we're finding out, but those secrets, they're not contradicting the entire basis of the world, and they are treated as these revelatory things that are challenging the character's perspective on the world. Kind of going back to the relationship between our main couple, he has been like keeping secrets from her and stuff like that, and I like how she she gets angry at him about it. I find so many times in romantic books that it's typically the male character will be keeping secrets from the female character. Even if she gets mad, she like very quickly forgives him, whereas I feel like in this, he typically does have like a reason behind what he's doing, and he'll explain that to her so that she can actually see his perspective. And sometimes she does like forgive him, and other times she does continue to be upset with him, which I just think is a lot more realistic. For some people, they might see Odessa as being maybe a bit more of a wishy-washy character because of that, but to me at least, it just shows that I think they're a lot better at communicating things to each other, even if that communication comes a lot later. Once again, the characters are also quite young in this as well. Odessa's only 23, and I don't know about our male character, but I reckon that he's under the age of 30. To some extent, their like immaturity does kind of make sense, and I think to another extent as well, this is like for both of them their first like actual serious relationships as well. So it makes sense that they have these kind of struggles, and I like how they're handled in a fashion that is a lot more realistic. Odessa as well, I think, has a lot of character strength. Even though she's not like the most physically like strong character, I think that she has a very strong set of morals and clear idea of what she believes is like the right way or the wrong way to treat people. And I love how that has shown through with her relationships with other characters. There is a young girl character in this named Evie who is connected to the royal family. Her relationship with Odessa is like so cute in my opinion, and I just love Odessa's relationship with Evie and other like specifically child characters that have shown up in the book is like breaking the sort of molds of like how she was treated in her past, and I just really like seeing her character like develop more and how she's challenging the trauma that was inflicted upon her when she was younger, how the book deals with Odessa sort of unpacking those emotions and that trauma in a way that is very respectful but also quite realistic as well. Like she has very complicated feelings about her father and stepmother and also her sister as well, and also how this sort of affects her relationship with her romance as well. I just think it's all been like really well done in my opinion. Like, at the part that I'm at, there's been this like major revelation, so I'm also like really eager to continue with this. I am kind of like nervous because I'm just like there's so many questions that I have about things and so many more story aspects that I want to follow with these characters that I don't think I'm going to get in this book because I only have like 50 pages left in it. It is kind of making me nervous, but so far I have been really enjoying this one. So I think I'm gonna go finish this and then probably film another update with my sort of final thoughts on the book and then my plans moving forward of what book I'm gonna read next. Alright, so it has been about an hour or so, as you can probably tell by the change in the lighting as the sun has like fully gone down, but I have finished Shield of Sparrows and I'm happy to report that this is yet another 5-star for me, which is really surprising. This is only my 5th 5-star so far of this year, which is honestly so shocking that I've had 2 of them so close together. I also had one from last month as well, which was The Rose Bargain, and then one in August as well, which was Blood Mercy by Bella Roth, and then the other one earlier in the year was Sunrise at the Reaping. I have had a lot of like high 4-star books as well, and I'm starting to like kind of wonder whether or not I've just been too harsh about some of my ratings. I feel like there are some books that I would kind of consider maybe 5 stars now. I think The Serpent and the Wolf by Rebecca Robinson is one of those books, and then also The Rag Picker King by Cassandra Clare. Those two I would probably also now make 5 stars. I don't know, I feel like I've been just very critical about the books that I've been reading so far, and it's not that I like don't like being critical about things, but I feel like I've just been holding books to such a high standard of everything needs to be perfect, and I feel some sort of like pressure around that because I've started like reviewing books, but I just feel like a 5-star should just be like a book that was perfect. And like this one, I wouldn't say it was perfect because like I did have those couple of chapters where I felt like it was pretty slow, but like overall the book was just like so good that there isn't like really anything that I would change about it. And when it comes to like 5 stars, I feel like that is the biggest takeaway that I want to have from that book, is that I wouldn't change anything about it because I am a very critical person. I am also someone who likes writing. I tend to think about like how I would have done a plot line differently if I had been the author of that book, or how I would have done some characterization differently. So when I come away from a book feeling like I wouldn't change really anything about this, that means to me at least that I really enjoyed it, and also that the author did a good job at telling the story that they wanted to tell, to a point where it was able to convince me that this story needed to be told as they told it. And that's how I feel about this book. I don't really have a lot of like criticism about it. I feel like just everything worked, and I liked the romance, I liked the characters, I liked the world building. Once again, I don't think it's the best world building in, you know, the history of fantasy, but I think it's a lot better than most of the romantasy books that I have read in the past. There's also a lot of setup and mystery that kind of continues on at the ending. The ending of this is like sort of a huge cliffhanger, and oh my gosh, am I anticipating the next book in this series. I think it's coming out in April, so it's not too long to wait, but it still is like I think half a year. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I also might consider picking up some of her contemporary romance as well, because I did enjoy her writing style, and that could be a potential to pick up. I have heard good things about her series, though I'm not fully clear on what it's about. Would highly recommend this one if you're looking for a romantasy book. As for what I'm gonna do next, I honestly don't really know. I feel like for me personally, I really struggle with reading books that have very like similar tropes or themes, and since this one was like an arranged marriage, I feel like I have read a lot of books that have that sort of arranged marriage of convenience trope, which is actually one of my favorite tropes, but I don't really want the next book that I read to have that trope as well. One of the next options that I have, and both of these options were included in my October TBR, one of them is Spellcaster by Jaymin Eve. I believe this one is like an enemies to lovers sort of dark academia fantasy, and we're following like a main character who's like a witch, and she has to somehow team up with a rival who's like connected to her family. And then the other one that I want to read is Servant of Earth by Sarah Hawley. I believe this one is following like a human girl who somehow gets roped into doing these like trials for the Fae. Both of these to me seem like really interesting options, so I'm not 100% sure which one I want to go with next. Probably decide sometime later tonight, because I should probably like stop reading because I have to finish a book review for one of my classes that I'm doing, which was actually the book that I was reading a bit earlier, which I think I took some clips of. It's called Mothers of Heroes, Mothers of Martyrs, and it's a survey of the commemoration of mothers during the First World War in Canada, and it's specifically talking about how the sort of experiences of women and mothers in particular were used as propaganda to convince people to send their sons into the war. It looks at sort of like the history of how mothers have been involved within commemorations, such as looking at the history of mothers of martyrs throughout different religious traditions, and also how the figure of the mother of the soldier has been used in commemoration ceremonies, and trying to relate this theme of like the mother of martyrs to the same phenomenon that we see a lot within discourse around the wars going on in the Middle East. And so the book in particular talks about Palestinian mothers, which I think is a very relevant topic nowadays, given how much more present the discussion around the war in Palestine has become. And I did like how the author was trying to unpack how the like private tragedies of people are co-opted by the state, and also offering that comparison between our own sort of past here in the West to the present reality in another place in the world, where we kind of see those forms of commemoration as being immoral. It sort of, I think, challenges the reader to sort of question their own positionality when they're casting judgment or trying to, in particular, criticize them as well. I kind of struggle with doing like academic book reviews though, like almost a bit hyperbolic considering that I have a whole channel about doing book reviews. So it's kind of weird to be like, oh, I struggle with writing book reviews, but I think the way that you have to write a book review for an academic book, and also in the context of like an academic setting, is a lot different than how I personally approach it when I'm doing personal book reviews, because I focus a lot on like how I interpret the book and how I feel about things, because I think with fiction books it's very hard to give like a clear delineation of like, this is how you should interpret the text or whatnot. Whereas I feel like nonfiction, there is exactly what the author is arguing, and you know, here's how they do that argument, these are the sources they use and stuff like that. So it's just a little bit more difficult to get my head in that more critical space, so to speak, and also trying to filter out my own opinions when I'm so used to giving my own opinions on books. And then I do also have like a midterm to study for as well, so I'm probably not going to do any more reading. However, the new trailer for Bridgerton season 4 was announced. I'm super excited for Bridgerton season 4 because Benedict is actually my favorite of the Bridgerton so far, and I actually haven't read any of the Bridgerton books aside from the first one. I don't think I finished it because I was listening to it as an audiobook and really did not like the narrator, and I have watched all 3 seasons of the show. The costumes are so well designed. Like, I know some people had like issues with like the season 3 costuming and historical inaccuracy and stuff like that, but the show is already, in my opinion, so historically inaccurate because like the whole setup in the first season is that slavery doesn't exist anymore and has been shut down because Queen Charlotte is a black woman and she and King George fell in love and stuff like that, so like slavery no longer exists. But in the historic reality, Queen Charlotte was not black, and in the Regency period was actually the height of the slave trade, and it's her 2 sons that allowed slavery to continue for as long as it did. So if we're gonna take issue with any approach to like historical inaccuracy when it comes to Bridgerton, I feel like the costumes are the least of concern. I'm also very interested to see how the show is going to sort of navigate this forbidden lovers dynamic as well, because there has been like certain extents of that first 3 seasons, but typically the forbidden love aspect has come more so from the characters' refusal to see each other in a particular way. Like in the first season, the Duke was like just emotionally closed off because of things that happened in his past. In the second season, Anthony's kind of closed off because of things that have happened in his past, and then in season 3, it's Colin just doesn't really see Penelope as a love interest because they have like such a storied past that goes back to their childhood, and he just never saw her in that way before. But like this time, there's like an actual reason that is entrenched within the social reality of the time for why Benedict and Sophie can't be together, because Sophie, even though she was like born noble, is being treated like a servant, and I do believe in the show works as a servant and also in the books as well. I do feel like the show has done a pretty good job at sort of providing some social commentary, even though like I did mention earlier that there is some criticism about how they represent the history of slavery. They've still somewhat gone about this alternative approach to history in a way that is somewhat believable, even if it doesn't exactly mirror the way that these things work. That was a bit of a tangent, but I hope that some of you are maybe excited for Bridgerton season 4 as well, and feel free to like leave any of your thoughts and feelings about Bridgerton as well, because I love talking about media, even if it's not books. So it has been a couple of days, and honestly I've been really like struggling with reading. I did begin the book Spellcaster, which I kind of mentioned as one of my options, and so far I have not been enjoying this. I'm about 200 pages in, and it's taken me probably 3 days just to get this far, and it's not like a dense book at all. Sort of getting into my thoughts about it, the writing style in this is not good, personally. The dialogue in particular is very choppy and seems very unnatural. It very much reads like a Wattpad book, which is not meant to be an insult to Wattpad at all, because a lot of the writers on there are very amateur. It can't be upheld to the same standards of published novels like this one, so that's why I have an issue with the writing style in this, because it is not supposed to be amateur writing because it's a published book, and I'm just not connecting with the characters or the story at all. We're following this main character named Paisley, who is born into this magical family, but she doesn't know what her powers are, and she has to attend this magical school. And there's this guy who the son of her father's nemesis, but she used to be childhood friends with him, and there's this really weird dynamic between them. So far it's just like nothing at all is like gripping about it. Paisley as a main character has like the personality of like an unsalted cracker, and Logan, the main character, is literally in the book as much as a shadow. We followed more of Paisley's home life and family than we have the actual romance. The synopsis is basically talking about how she has to go to this prestigious witch college and how she feels all these like expectations of upholding her family legacy, and how there's Logan, who's the enemy, and there's also these monsters that are like chasing her, and she has to team up with Logan. Like, none of this has even happened. Like, the main draw to it is that they have to work together to fight off these monsters, and the monsters don't even start being a problem until over 160 pages into this book, which is almost halfway. It has like next to no substance to it at all. Like, even the tagline is, to fight a monster she'll need a monster. But even like from what we've known about Logan so far, there's nothing about him that's monstrous. And this is kind of a spoiler for the book a little bit, but Logan has a very valid reason to dislike her family, because his mother was basically like killed in this freak accident, and her mother was the last person to have seen his mother. From his perspective, her mother could have had something to do with his own mother's death. Yet her mother has like next to no recollection of this event happening at all. And for most of the book is just acting like a normal suburban mom. The family as well, they're just acting like a sitcom family, and it just doesn't make sense for the darker tone that this book is supposed to give based on like the cover and the description. Why am I reading basically Modern Family but with like magic? That's not what this book presents itself as being, so I'm just really not enjoying it because it's like false advertising. Like, the book is not about what it's marketing itself to be, because these monsters don't even become relevant until over halfway, yet that's most of the synopsis is focused on. I'm not liking this book, and I honestly am kind of considering DNFing it at this point because I don't even care what happens. There's also a lot of sexually charged discussion in it, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's jarring for this book in particular because it comes out at the weirdest times. She has these reoccurring spicy dreams that are allegedly about Logan. So weird and jarring because her dialogue and her actions are like, oh, I hate Logan, and she's saying all these horrible things about him despite the fact that he's actually done nothing wrong, and it's just her father being like paranoid about him. And compare this to something like Zodiac Academy, where in contrast, the authors actually do build a tension between the characters that contextualizes why they have those more complicated feelings between both hatred and like passion for one another. And I do feel like this book is kind of marketed itself around maybe the hype around something like Zodiac Academy. There still is a lot of similarities in how the magic school is kind of working, and also the focus more so on friends and relationships more than the actual magic system, I think is kind of similar to Zodiac Academy. But what Zodiac Academy does well, in my opinion, is that it's very entertaining. Like, yes, it's not well thought out, brilliantly crafted plot lines, but things are happening and the characters have personalities and they have stability to their personality, so much so that like I felt like Tori and Darcy, despite the fact that they were twins, actually seemed like unique characters, whereas almost every single character in this book so far has seemed they were made with the same gingerbread man cookie cutter, where they don't feel like actual people. They feel like you're watching someone do like a paper dolls play. And I'm upset that I purchased this book and that I thought I would enjoy it, because this author wrote another book series that I haven't read, but I did watch a TV show that was based on it, which was called Supernatural Academy, which oddly was actually very similar to Zodiac Academy from the premise, because we're following two twin sisters who were separated at birth and they're both like werewolves. I actually really liked these sort of friendships and relationships in that show, which I suspect, you know, has something at least to do with the books, even though I do think a lot was changed from the books. But this just doesn't have any of that at all. Even the magic system has next to no depth to it. There's like people who have different elemental powers, and then there's necromancers, and then there's someone called spellcasters, which I think have the ability to use all of the magic, and like Logan is one of these spellcasters, but Paisley, our main character, has no clue what her magic is, but of course she's super powerful because that's probably why all these monsters are chasing her or whatnot, but there's no indication of like why she has these powers or what these powers even mean. There's also no notion of like how the society itself functions. Like, we learned a little bit at the beginning that people are sort of organized into covens once they graduate, but I struggle to conceptualize how that would work as a society and what jobs or tasks or roles the different magic users would play. Like, you know, are there rules regulating who gets to be a necromancer and what they can do with their necromantic powers? Because you can't just have people resurrecting the dead and have zombies walking around all the time. I mean, you could, but it probably wouldn't help to make a society function very well. It makes the reading experience very confusing because I don't know how to go about conceptualizing the world and how the characters are interacting with it. It just kind of feels like the magic used almost as an accessory. It's not an actual core part of the plot line, which for a book that is literally called Spellcaster is what I would expect. So this so far has not delivered on anything that the synopsis has talked about. Not even the romance aspect, because Logan is barely even present in this book. So it's a lot different than the Zodiac Academy books, where the male heirs are basically acting very rude towards the female characters, which makes you root for them. Because in this one, we're just watching Paisley think these horrible things about Logan, who's literally, through his actions, done nothing wrong other than just happen to be the son of his father's nemesis. It's not a good book. I would not recommend this. I'm disappointed that I purchased this in the first place. I probably still will try and finish it just because I'm almost done it. That will probably be the next update, and then I think after that I'm probably going to end this vlog, which is kind of disappointing because the other two books that I've read have been 5 stars, and 2 that I really enjoyed and really connected with, and this one is just the complete polar opposite of everything from those books that I like. On a side note of things though, I did want to offer a couple of like updates about other things going on in my life. It's not like anything exciting, but I did finish that book review that I had to do, and I also started writing again in my novel, and yesterday I wrote about 3,500 words, which is roughly about 10 to 12 manuscript pages, which was a lot more than I was expecting to get out. And honestly, I had a really like good time turning to that story and returning to the character, and I think that's why I wasn't really encouraged to pick up like Spellcaster like yesterday and for the past couple of days. Is just because I haven't felt drawn to it, and so I'm honestly more interested in the book that I'm writing, obviously, for, you know, most books, just because it's like I wouldn't be writing the book if I wasn't interested in the first place. But just in this particular case, it just, writing my book compared to reading this book is like a very jarring experience, because I don't mean to sound like some like narcissistic person or anything like that, but I just feel like my story is a lot more complex and my characters are a lot more complex, and my writing style in general is more suited to my own taste, obviously, because no one's gonna write a book that they wouldn't read. So I don't know, that's just a little update, and I am planning on maybe filming a video sometime soon talking more about that specific book project that I'm working on. I've just kind of been struggling with working on it recently because one of the major themes in it is sort of a discussion around grief. I recently lost a family member a couple of months ago, and so that kind of discussion is just very heavy at the moment, and in part, like, it is good to have those same emotions as your characters, but sometimes it can be very challenging when you're sort of in the thick of the moment to sort of communicate those feelings. There's also a lot of other sort of personal with that book, which I'll talk about more when I do decide to film a separate video about it, because I just don't want to like misrepresent what my book is about, because like I was talking about with Spellcaster, I think one of the most egregious things that you can do is market your book improperly, because the main goal behind book marketing should not be to sell as many copies. It should be to get it into the hands of the readers who will actually enjoy it. And I really dislike the way that a lot of book marketing is done nowadays, and the way that we discuss books and talk about them online, because a lot of it I feel like is framed more toward you need to read this book rather than this is why you should read this book. It's just telling you what you should do rather than giving you the information to allow you to make your own decisions about it. So that's why I would like to do a more in-depth video talking about my book, so that anyone who might be watching would not be getting an inaccurate sort of summary about what it's about, because my priority as like an aspiring writer is finding an audience who would actually like the book rather than encouraging people to buy it. I want people to actually be interested in the story and what it's talking about. So I hope that doesn't seem like conceited at all or anything. It's just something that's kind of like been on my mind. Maybe if there's any other authors or aspiring authors out there watching this, maybe you relate. Alright, so it is the next day and I did end up finishing Spellcaster. I finished it early this morning, and then I did start another book, but I'm not going to talk about that other book because I need to end this video soon. My sentiments kind of are the exact same as what I expressed before. I didn't enjoy this book. I didn't really feel like anything interesting happened in the latter half as well. I didn't like the romance. I didn't like the characters. Like, nothing really happened in this, honestly. I mean, even getting to the end, there was a little sort of like revelation about things that were going on, but it's more of like trying to set up the second book rather than actually offering satisfying conclusion to what's been going on here. Obviously, like, cliffhangers are to be expected and all that, but this just felt to me overall like just a book full of nothing. I highly recommend not checking out this book. I mean, I do think that there are some readers who would enjoy it, but I don't really have a lot of positives to say about it. I don't think that there's anything necessarily problematic about it, which I do think is a good thing, but I don't recommend it in any way either. Kind of brings an end to this reading portion of things. I did also go out to the store today, so I have like a couple things, do a little mini haul at the end. So I went with Bath and Body Works because I love going to Bath and Body Works. I love having candles. And so I got two from like their new collection. Sugar pretzel cookie, bakery, cinnamon apple are like my favorite like scents, especially coming into the fall and winter months. And then the other one was also from that collection, and it's the raspberry holiday bar. I think it's a very unique compared to a lot of the other scents that I have in candles, because I do really like fruit ones, and then I also like the bakery ones. I love burning candles when I read books, so I feel like if anyone else is in a similar boat as me, that may be some that you might want to pick up yourself. And then I also went to Hot Topic, which is not a store that I usually go to, but I have been really wanting this sweater, which is inspired by the Fantastic Four, and given that like Halloween is coming up, I kind of like wanted it so that maybe I could do a little mini like cosplay for Halloween, because I love Fantastic Four and I actually really just like the design of these in general. I think they're a lot more casual and like wearable than a lot of other like superhero things. But that sort of brings us to the end of vlog and video. This is my first time ever doing like a video in this sort of more vlog type format. I've had both challenges and had fun with it. I really enjoyed being able to update about what I'm thinking about a book as I'm reading through it, and I hope if you've made it so far in this video have enjoyed listening to my thoughts on these books as well, and hopefully might be encouraged to pick up the two that I read at the beginning that I really enjoyed. I don't think they'll work for everyone, but they did work for me, and once again, just thank you for hanging out with me. Doing vlogs was something that I felt a bit maybe insecure about, just because I don't feel like I have as much of like a aesthetically satisfying or like beautiful daily life as a lot of other people do. I don't really do a lot of things. I don't have, you know, this nice fancy house or, you know, the most beautiful bookshelves and stuff like that. Also, a big thing for me about like wanting to start my channel in the first place was just wanting to find people to connect with. There's probably a lot of you out there who are probably in the same boat where you just don't really have a lot of, you know, fancy things in your life and whatnot. And I hope that by watching this video, maybe you felt that you could enjoy spending this time with me and talking about books, maybe reading books alongside me. So once again, thank you. And if you have made it this far in the video, maybe leave the like book emoji in the comment, and as always, feel free to leave any other like discussion or suggestions or whatnot in the comments. So thank you once again, and goodbye.